Hello, everybody. How you doing? Welcome in. Good to see you all. This is the Citizen Central podcast. It's our monthly show where we get a few different creators from around the space and we talk about some of the bigger topics going on with Star Citizen. I am leaning off the side a little bit in our live feed stream.
It's the space lean.
The space lean. I don't like the space lean. Take it away. Take me away from the space lean. All right, we're just going to leave it like that, guys. Welcome in, everybody. Today we are talking about CitizenCon. It is past. We've had a couple days to stew on it, to reflect, to soak it in, to feel our feelings. And now I want to know from you guys, was it a success? What was even the goal? How did it do? Is all lost, or is all gained, or somewhere in between? So, first I'm going to let you guys start out by introducing yourselves, your own content, what you do and where you come from. Yeah, I got that. And we'll get started after that. Historian, how about we start with you?
Hi, hello. My name is Paul Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the Astropub and your professor at the AstroHistorian. I do content based around Star Citizen and sci-fi and space games in general. I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/theastropub, and also on YouTube, youtube.com/theastropub live. But I do most of my content, which most people know me through my lore content, which is the AstroHistorian, where I cover lore mostly of Star Citizen, but I've done a lore piece on Titanfall. I've done lore for Cyberpunk and Starfield, and I'm doing one on Mech Warrior because of the Mech Warrior game that came out recently, which is really fun. You should all get it. Yeah, that's me. And you can also, I have something similar to this called the Captain's Table, which I do on Saturdays at, to get the times right, it's 5 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Yes, that's right. Where we stream live and then put up on YouTube as well.
Lord Stradamus, we call him.
Only now, because of Castra, my title has ascended.
Castradamus?
Yes.
That rolls pretty well. TenPoundFortyTwo, my friend. Give them a shout.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Yes, hello. I'm from here. I'm from the internet. No, I'm from you. I mean, Paul, that's a very good intro. I really need to work on something that good. But yeah, I'm TenPoundFortyTwo, and I'm literally just on YouTube. That's enough internet for me, so I don't go on any other of the sites.
Probably a good call.
Yeah, I think so. But my content is normally all to do with how to get your PC to run the game at a half decent frame rate, which is hard work a lot of the time. So I do lots of testing of parts and things like that. But then I also occasionally dabble in the most dangerous thing, opinions on the game. So yeah,
good luck.
Lots of fun. Yeah, just on YouTube for me.
Hav0k, how about yourself?
I am Hav0k, and I am reside in Idaho, so it's a pretty boring area, but it's nice.
But also internet, right?
And
internet.
Yes, also internet.
Yeah, cool.
Yes,
good.
internet Idaho.
They have internet in Idaho?
Yes, ironically. But I primarily make content for Star Citizen, and that's all I do really is. I also do gear review and whatnot as well, but you can find me at youtube.com/Hav0k, and yeah, I'm the speculations guy that usually people don't really like because ideas are bad.
Don't worry, you're fitting right into the club then. No ideas. Red
No
Monster,
ideas at all.
my friend, and my mining friend is what I know you for really. But tell the people where you're from.
Oh, hey folks, I'm RedMonsterSC. I stream on Twitch and YouTube as well as put out YouTube video guides. I'm an industrial focused player, so that encompasses mining, salvage. Gonna be a whole lot of base building and space station building in the future for me. So, yeah, I do 2 streams a week here on Twitch and YouTube, both, but also go through and try to put community resources for those industrial focused players.
Nice. Yeah, and we're gonna have a lot to talk about industry wise today. It's gonna be it's looking good. So today, folks, we are going to not go through everything at CitizenCon because we would be sitting here forever if we did that. and everybody's got somewhere to be. So we're going to pick out some of the highlights, some of the biggest things that we've noticed, and some of the things that just more personally, resonate with each of us here on the show. But I'm going to start out by asking a question to all of you, just to get the ball rolling. What was going into this CitizenCon this year? I think last year the big focus was like, is server meshing a thing, and where the heck is Squadron 42? Has that changed for you? Did you go into this CitizenCon kind of with the same type of things that need to be proven out? Did you have a different idea of what would make this a successful CitizenCon? What were your thoughts? Hav0k, I feel like Hav0k has something to say on that right away.
I was pretty disappointed not to see a release of Squadron 42, I'll be honest, but that was probably a very extremely hopeful thought process.
You wanted to release at CitizenCon.
Yeah. Pretty
nice.
insane.
I like it. Bold.
Yeah.
But that was, out of the entirety of CitizenCon, that was probably the only disappointing part of it that I was upset about.
Okay.
I'll say in the convention panel, like the convention hall, as we got to the end of that trailer and they ran that montage near the end, and it comes up and it says Squadron 42, and everybody saw that 2026 at the top, and you could feel like it was like a really large overinflated balloon just lost a little bit of air. But I think overall everybody, with some tempered realism, there was a moment there for sure. You could sense.
It was definitely like everything was building. Yeah, this is so cool. Oh my God, the music. Wow, look at this last little trailer to show us the game. It feels really great. And like, it was the same thing throughout the entire CitizenCon. Every time they showed anything, everybody's first word was, well, when? And so it was like they got to the end of this Squadron 42 demo, and everybody's like, okay, all right, are they going to give us a release date? Are they going to say winter 2025? Are they going to say tomorrow? And then it comes up and the logo's there and everybody's like, oh my God. And then it flips and it says 2026. And it's just like,
It was a classic example of when you should deliver the bad news first. They probably should have said that and then shown their incredible demo.
Or at least have had something other than it's 2026, goodbye. Like it was such an anticlimactic bad way. Like I would say that is a textbook mistake on how to talk about bad news with your audience. Just dropping it and then leaving without any explanation. I know Chris was upset, but like I understood. I've always been of the opinion that like CIG would announce it for 2025 and then they would push it to 2026, because which game hasn't had a release date announcement and then been pushed several months, if not longer, because of it? I mean,
years.
Yeah. True, but like what Cyberpunk had like 2 or 3 different postpones, and it was still not enough. Starfield had at least 1 postponement, and it wasn't for a year. Space Marine 2, which I really enjoy, but that was pushed a year back. Like even Jump Ship, the game that I've been looking forward to, they just announced that they pushed back their release from 2024 to 2025. So like hitting dates is difficult. So I was expecting them to be like, hey, this is what we're going to go for, and then they'll hit like spring of this year, the next year, and being like, maybe we need more time, and then delay it again. But instead, they seem to just straight up to 2026. So I understand why people might be a little deflated by that, because it's also like, so this is going to be delayed to 2027, 2028. Like, what's going on?
The scary part. Yeah.
I'm so proud of Satisfactory for the way they've handled just about everything they've ever done, because I feel like in all of the examples of how not to do things, Satisfactory tends to do it the other way. And from what I've seen, people in the community are just so happy with that game. For you guys who were there in person when that did come up, you said it felt like, Red Monster, you said like felt like the balloon slightly deflated, but like walking out of the conference with that being the very last thing that happened, what was the energy in the air?
The energy in the air was still there, because everyone just saw a working full playthrough of that prologue, and we were all like, there was a lot that they threw at us. First, it is a cinematic masterpiece as far as introductions to the game, and yeah, it was pretty heavy on that, but we understand that's your introduction, first of all, to the game, the universe, to the mechanics. I think they covered a good amount of that. At the end, you're even sitting there helping pilot the Javelin, and you can see that kind of track that it's going to take as you're getting ready to go just crash right through, right? So that was, I know a lot of people were slightly disappointed, but then they threw so much at us with the different mechanics within the game, the difficulty, the Vandal rework. I think there was a lot of things that people were very, very excited about, and kind of combining that with the understanding, yeah, we did have 2 crashes. There was a couple of points in the prologue where like one of the characters' faces on the bridge like switched to a completely different model
Yeah.
right in the middle of one of those cutscenes. So we understand a few rough edges, but you've got to give someone at Kotaku something to write about. So
they gotta get them that ramen money, right?
Yeah,
Right. Absolutely.
So besides the obviously Squadron 42 and the release date, what else were you guys really going into this CitizenCon thinking needed to be at least talked about that they either did or did not hit?
Yeah, I think going in, my expectation, like number one, we needed squadron information and we got it, right? So that's number one. I think people were a little disappointed that it's 2026, but realistically, we're 45, 50, however many days away till the end of this year. They've got some work to do, but 2026, we'll see as we get a closer release date. We're in that 2-year time frame, and I mean, granted, we might have always been there. The other thing is endgame stuff. What are orgs going to matter, right? Why is the 1.0 going to be so important, and how does that make it feel like some of those other mature MMO games? And we saw, the new org tools. We saw space station building, which is like one of those ultimate end goals. They gave us a lot of information around that. We now have the Sandworm. They're going to have like kind of raid dungeons underneath like Area 18. And I think that's going to be, those are going to be those long-term progressions, as well as that, your reputation within the factions and guilds. So,
Anybody else on that?
I will say the thing that I came in expecting little, because I feel like that last year was lightning in a bottle. Last year was the first time they'd come back from a long absence. So it was the first in-person CitizenCon, and they had a lot of backlog of Squadron 42 tech that they were ready to release. And so they were just like, hey, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and it's going to come out in the next 6 months and the next year. Like, it was all sort of stuff that wasn't just, here's a sandworm, good, that we'll never see again. It was like, which ironically, but it was stuff that felt tangible. They saw it, they were playing in game, they were showing it off, like it had some similar bugs to what we were experiencing in live, so we knew it was real. And last year was just that sort of a great moment, and it's like they were never going to capture it, and I don't think they did. But I do think that what they needed to hit, especially with the 1.0 panel, was a tangible way of what the game is going to look like at 1.0, with that, the way that you could sit there and say, this is where I see the game. I can now see where the game is going, rather than just hopes and dreams. Here's our plan. Here's how it's going to work. Like, they basically did a visual version of a white paper on what Star Citizen's going to be. Not as detailed, but close enough.
Yeah.
And I think they nailed that. For good or for ill, they nailed that in terms of exactly what they're going to do. I think time will tell if that's good or bad, but I think that's what they did right. I think the end was of first day one was pretty underwhelming, and the social aspect was, a lot of people I saw were saying, why do we care? This is like asking, this is like being surprised or making a big deal out of the fact that this car has brakes. It's like an MMO with social features,
Yeah.
It was nice, but like I think day one was mostly just kind of average. It was like, all right, and then ended poorly. And then day two was just hype from the moment one to the end, and it was they just did not stop, and it ended on a really, really high note. So
yeah, day two popped off. I think that last panel was just so important. I mean, it was both last panels of either day were just the most important parts of the entire convention, and I'm really glad we got that sort of full summary of most of what Star Citizen 1.0 would be. I feel like we missed some stuff, but they didn't get super detailed.
Yeah.
TenPound or Hav0k, did you guys have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think I was hoping for 1.0 stuff. The only thing that kind of wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting a little bit more kind of meat on the journey towards that big vision. They threw so much stuff at the wall almost. The space station stuff. The panel just kept going and expanding and expanding and expanding.
Yeah.
And I love the vision for it, but the lack, not that they were ever going to give an actual date that they were aiming for, but the lack of any sort of framework for how they're going to deliver those things. And I guess maybe we'll find out in ISCs or from a letter from who I'm calling Rich, the chairman now of the EU. I think.
Yeah.
I think Chris has given up. Not giving up. That's unfair. But I think his baby is Squadron, and I think he's basically handed fully over the reins. It looks like that way to Rich. So I wonder if we'll get a bit more detail in the next few months. But it's bizarre to think that once 4.0 comes out, we've got no idea how they plan on tackling anything. So I was expecting a little bit more kind of meat, not dates, but some sort of how they've had in the past, where they think there's been kind of markers they want to hit on the journey. But there's no way that that's all just going to be delivered in one big patch for 1.0. It's going to be dot patches for 4.0 that eventually then we arrive at 1.0. But yeah, I think I was hoping for a bit more meat maybe on the
like it would have been interesting to know how like the guilds were going to come in, if they were going to just completely restart with how guilds work, because we already have like a couple guilds and a little bit of reputation. Like how much of that is just going to get wiped versus just building on that and going from there with like the missions and where are mission givers fitting in, because they talked about people who would represent the factions and guilds, but we don't know if they're still going to be the same as what they originally wanted mission givers to be. So those kind of details, I feel like, were the type of things that Rich was like, I could keep talking for 10 hours, and everyone's like, yes, please.
Yeah. But then Jared Huckabee would be out of a job, right? And we wouldn't have ISC content for the next year.
I do think I do think that there is something to say about CIG sitting down and doing a design docs again and showing us 1.0 through a design doc format, even if it's like done along the lines of like, let Jared do an ISC. Here's a white doc afterwards. So this is the high level, and now here's the details that you're going to look through. Because I think fans, especially Star Citizen fans, are a lot more technical. Because the average audience is much older. We're talking in their mid to late 30s is the average.
Getting worse, by the way.
Yeah.
Further.
Well, ironically, it's actually getting younger because the new folks
people
have been
are dying.
coming in.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. A lot of the folks who came in between 2020 and 2024 are in their 20s or late teens, which was a strange thing to look at the demographics on my side when I'm looking at YouTube and Twitch. I'm like, where are these 20-year-olds coming to play Star Citizen? But at the same time, it's like that's still like most people who play Star Citizen are people who come from technical backgrounds. So if CIG wants us to help them kind of vet out problems that they may not have caught internally, a white paper or not a white paper, a design doc released so that we have an idea of what they're going to do, we can find the edge cases a lot easier as a community and point them out to them. So,
I would love to like know for certain that those old design documents can no longer be referenced, because that's still what I think a lot of the information surrounding that gameplay goes back to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It in some ways, this was a bit of a reset of quite a lot of stuff. This was the kind of MMO-ification of the game. And as they kind of have ended this period of getting the core tech running, and as that's kind of the last kind of marker for that is obviously server meshing, it's almost like with Rich taking over from Todd Pappy and Tony Z falling into a black hole somewhere, it's almost as though we've now got a new vision for what it is, a reset. And I think you're right, getting some details on what that looks like would be very interesting. But I reckon we could either look back at this CitizenCon and be like, that was the beginning of the actual development of a lot of the gameplay of the game. But there is a small chance, because some of the stuff was kind of so nebulous and out there, and we're planning to do this and we think we'll do this, there is a chance that we might look back in a few years and go, ooh, that was not a great one, because they've put so much out there. How much of that will change over the next 5 years? We could look back and be like, that was a sandworm one again, even though had a sandworm, but you know what I mean. It was they just threw a load of stuff out there and then they changed all their planet. It's going to be interesting to see.
Well, that's actually an interesting line of thinking, because that is something that there have always been discussions surrounding Star Citizen about it being different than other MMOs. You know, I don't want it to do the same thing other MMOs are doing. And we do see some of that starting to come in more, especially with that 1.0 talk and some of these other panels, things like instanced dungeons, things like stats on your armor, your weapons, and monster hunting scenarios, things like that. Do you guys feel like the vision has kind of shifted on what Star Citizen is supposed to be? Should people get on board with that? Is there going to be just a even greater schism now between our I guess representatively speaking, our master modes versus no master modes people are people who are looking for like the interesting, fun for everyone gamification versus the hardcore, more different from everything else kind of game?
Yes. I think there was a gigantic shift there. This is it's not as sudden because they've been talking about it recently, and with things like master modes, you're starting to see that. But I think the major shift is that CIG is taking Star Citizen from being a idea that Chris had of taking Freelancer 2 and making it multiplayer, and then just continually adding things to that as he went along, like taking obviously the I always like to think that Star Citizen doesn't really have scope creep; it has scope bloat. They promised the universe.
Yeah, now they have to deliver
very early on, and now they have to deliver. It was like Chris had an idea for Freelancer 2, and then that went from Freelancer 2 to Freelancer 2 plus an entirely different game added on top of that.
Yeah.
So to sort of like figure out how that works. And then what they did is they took those ideas and then they just threw some parts out that didn't work, and then they synthesized the rest into Star Wars Galaxies 2. That's what this is. And it feels like there's a huge influence of Star Wars Galaxies and Ultima Online. There's a lot of those sorts of that sort of sandbox or attempted sandbox MMO into the mix. So
people have been saying that it feels like a spiritual successor to Star Wars Galaxies for a long time now too.
Yeah. And really the 1.0 timeline they gave us, they talked about it being, you want to have endgame content. I think that marks the shift from being a tech demo where we're just trying to get server meshing. And I mean, a few years ago, you didn't have your own gravity zones within a spaceship, and transitioning was broken, but they've developed all of this, tech demo work. And now to put those tools into an MMO space where you have a reason to go out and do that. And you can go and do whatever you want. Like all of the main story are optional, but at the same time, right? The way to get players in and keep doing it, right, is progression. You've got to put something meaningful for orgs to do. And I think they really highlighted what their plan is to do that with the 1.0. And, obviously we're going to have people that love just being a tester for a broken tech demo. And, they're going to have the PTU version of the 1 point whatever release that they're free to go live in that universe, right? And deal with the wipes when it happens. But understand, there's got to be that live service game with the MMO aspects that people really wanted out of their space games. So
I feel you. Let's talk about the way things were presented. This was, as Historian pointed out, a different presentation style than it was last year. A lot of the stuff from last year was coming from Squadron and kind of ready to be shown off to be pushed into the PU. This year, a lot of the things we saw were on slides. They were on just kind of videos. A lot of it did say gray box, but that was very, I think, prettied up gray box work. In general, do you feel like there was not enough just straight up in-game representation this year like there was last year? Do you think that emphasizes a lot of this stuff being further out? And if so, what then do you think they could have done to better show us what we might get next year as opposed to a couple years down the line? Not all at once.
I think AstroHistorian summed it up well in that last year was a bit of a unique scenario in that they just happened to have tons of work that they'd been doing for a Squadron to suddenly show us. That hasn't really been ever the case at CitizenCon. So partly people might have thought coming into this one, oh, maybe it'll be the same as next year, but obviously that wasn't. They've obviously spent a significant amount of time this year planning all of this stuff, and it was heavy on slides, kind of mock-ups, artwork, all the effectively all of it was. Even the thing that surprised me was that even the Planet Tech stuff that we saw, the Genesis stuff, it wasn't like they were showing us, oh, here's a new version of Microtech or something. It was very kind of early stages tech, and
Looked like
I
Terra.
don't think we should be.
Looked like they were showing us stuff from Terra, swamps and things.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they've not got the Genesis tech to the point where they can actually deploy it on a planet. That's the key thing that probably they didn't really say out loud, but they've got all these things that they've been working on, but they were only really able to show us them in individual video demos. And then we had the nice weather bit at the end, which I guess was putting it all together. But it was quite nebulous. It was quite loose, and it did feel quite far away again, everything they showed us. And obviously the only real date that we got, unless I missed another one, was when Chris said base building and the monster hunting stuff is 12 to 18 months away. I mean, let's all remember, when Chris tells us a date, that you should have probably add another year onto that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out from here, because it did all feel very early work. Yeah.
I was going to say the CIG was coming into this CitizenCon at disadvantage. They have something like 40 to 60% of what they said that they were talked about last year in the game as of the CitizenCon. And if 4.0 comes out, it's closer to completion. There's some stuff that I think people were holding CIG to, like base building, that being in the game, but they said that it wasn't going to be in the game. Like, you said it, talked about it. I was like, they said it was going to start working on this year. And it's ridiculous to think that CIG can do that in a year. But then there's other stuff like the new quantum travel tech, which still has we haven't heard anything about monthly reports. They haven't talked about it in their like internal communications, the way they talk to us. Like, where is that? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, and we saw visuals of it, like recordings of that new quantum travel happening. But
I really hope it's a 4.0 surprise, but it is. You are right. They haven't said anything about it basically at all.
Yeah, and so it's like they were already coming in with a disadvantage, and so people are already going to say, "Cool, we're seeing all these nice tech, but are we going to see this before we die?" Like, the 2026 date for Squadron 42 was like people are going to make jokes from now until the end of time. I mean, the joke is Squadron 42 is 2 years away since 2012.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep making that joke until CIG actually, it's I've said this before, it's put up or shut up. And I think what they showed was nice. Like, a lot of it was like the gray box status, because typically when CIG is doing something in gray box, it takes 6 to 9 months for them to get it from gray box to final art, especially if it's larger assets. That's nuts, because that seems like CIG. If CIG is claiming these are in gray box,
which was all of the base building and space station building kind of stuff, right?
Well,
and also Nick.
Yeah. Nick's
So-
is more believable to me than the base building, to be honest.
Going back to that, I mean, they did have a recorded demo of their base building. Last year, we got some visuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was no detail to it as far as like player-owned bases and all that. This year, we got kind of a working tech demo, and granted, there were some changes of perspective. It was pre-recorded, so there is some staging and black magic to be going on to, mentioning the cargo boxes around disappearing. That could be something they just toggle in the back end during the recording, right? But what we did see was them actually placing buildings down, getting the footprint in, starting with the UIs, having a very large palette of prefab buildings that were going to connect to each other. And then kind of the artwork and some of the details around the space station they showed already shows that there's been a lot of visual work done on those assets. So it may have been that could have been something they've been working on for a while. Didn't want to spoil with last year because it was too early, and then this year there was a lot of meat behind that, kind of that space station crafting aspect.
I was quite surprised by the mobiGlas stuff that they showed in the social features segment. All of that I'm pretty sure was concept art, and it was stark contrast to last year when the stuff they were trying to show us that they wanted to do for the mobiGlas was mostly in-game kind of stuff, from the maps to even some of the FPS scanning stuff. That was like in-engine demos, but then they showed us this stuff and it was basically just pictures of it. That caught me off guard, because I was really hoping that we would be seeing some good work on org tools, on VoIP improvements and stuff that they could like show us in person.
Yeah, I think that was my big issue, was that was coming around to say there was too much slideshow and not enough content. Though the end was much better. Like the day 2 was almost all content with some concept art here and there, but it was mostly just gray box, which was impressive.
Let's talk about that first panel with Genesis. I think that was one of the more interesting, less expected parts, maybe. It seems like they are really starting to flesh out the ability to create very varied environments, from the dynamic weather to the actual biomes that they're making are much more extreme than just, oh, we've got different plants here. There's crazy advancements with the density, the cloud coverage, the just overall ability to make a ecosystem. Was anything in that panel something that jumped out specifically to you guys?
Resource deposits that were kind of popped in there, seeing ground-based resources, and specifically like extractor type items there. We're going away from our current mineral distributions, where we're going to have, we might still have potential rocks and deposits that your prospector and your mole can do, but there will be underground deposits of a specific mineral type, and that I think is going to have a lot of what the future resource extraction is going to look like.
Did they say? I might have.
Like...
Sorry.
Oh, is the prospector's finally going to mine downwards now?
I feel like I might have missed that. Where was that part?
That they were showing some of the different locations as you were trying to like put down a base, and I think there was an area that had like a nature reserve on it, blocked out.
Okay, I remember that.
There was like one slide in there where it had a big highlighted, resource deposit, like 2,000 SCU of an entirely new material there. So.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And
that's cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead, TenPound.
No, I was going to say, and that was the whole thing with the Pioneer, wasn't it? That it can just land on one of those and start extracting. So, yeah, you're right. It's a big chain. That's all of the stuff that they did with the planets. Again, it wasn't like they weren't at the point where they could just click a button and generate a planet. That didn't sound like they were anywhere near that. But all of it sounds good. And from my side of things, the global illumination stuff is exciting purely because, like they said on the slide, I think it allows them to not have to individually light every area. They can just let the engine do it. And so for people wanting lots of planets and wanting them to expand the game past 5 star systems at some point, tech like that is vital, because they do need to eventually be able to, maybe not quite as simply as this, but they do need to be able to press a button, put in some different properties, and say, voila, here's our new planet. So hopefully it'll be interesting to see when we get our first Genesis generated planet. Will they replace one in Stanton or in Pyro? Will we get an example? Or will they just want to do everything all at once?
I am wondering about that. I am so excited for what this means for exploration, though. For the idea that you can start getting missions that tell you to go scan planets and find resource deposits and turn that information in to get paid by like a space station or something. That is peak what I've been wanting to do for a long time, and it's cool to see the initial steps of that happening. We just need that star map to get updated so we can actually place our own data points.
Yeah, no kidding.
Something else that seemed like this, the Genesis panel felt like an extension of the Star Engine stuff we saw last year, which brings back into the discussion the speculation that CIG may one day either use this engine for other projects or even license it out for other projects. Do you think that that is still possibly somewhere that they are headed, and the ways that they continue to try and highlight the benefits of this engine to make it more diverse and able to do bigger and better things?
I mean, they've talked about building these tools for how many years, right? Different tools to help them place rivers and things. We got specials in 2 and 3 years at least of really detailed panels of these individual pieces that are all coming together. When Area 18 finally came out, ArcCorp, they had another panel on how they've got their procedural. I think it's just the maturation of their planetary generation. Now that they have all of the, the tech demo stuff out of the way, like it's coming up to a high level of quality that they could ship that as an entire package. And yeah, it may be something that they continue to work on with Star Citizen, but then they might kind of get that licensed out for other type of games that are trying to do this. But obviously, like that's all based on their Star engine that they're trying to kind of keep as a unique package here.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think it isn't. I have in the past thought, or what they're trying to do here by pushing all this Star engine stuff. I have a feeling it's maybe more about attracting devs to say, come and look at what we're doing. This is really cool. Yeah. We want you to come. And me and Red were on the studio tour the other day, and a big part of that was, I think, this is a cool place to work. Come and work here. I think they've got so many other things to worry about at this stage than to start selling parts of the engine or the engine. Or licensing out. I'd be shocked if we see that any time. And there's even questions: can they do it? Because of obviously the fact that it's CryEngine / Lumberyard / Star Engine. There's complications around there. But I think they just want to put it out there to us to make us think, wow, this is really cool and cutting edge, and also attract more people to come and work there.
They should put out trailers where they're like, look at the documentation we have. Trust us, it's actually usable.
They might not have that though.
I don't think
it makes a lot of sense.
Go ahead, Hav0k.
No, sorry. I think it makes a lot of sense as a financial move, especially considering how unique and detailed their tech is. It would bring a lot more additional funding if they did, but I'm not too convinced that they would. Yeah, but it would make so much sense.
Yeah, I think there's a big risk of cannibalization, right? If you give some other game your this amazing tech to be able to generate planets, and they go and do something on top of that people like better, that's a huge risk.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons, but I could definitely see the pros outweighing the cons. It would just require a lot of employees to maintain it for other people too.
And I like the aspect of it being a recruiting tool for high quality artists, designers, and engineers that can come and help work on these systems, because that's so many people come in as fans of the game that get jobs there and are just doing stellar work. So it's I do see that also as kind of a recruiting tool, and Jared's mentioned that in the ISC episodes as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say is that I don't. CIG just isn't set up for selling the Star engine yet. I think that's probably down the line, and I think that's one of the reasons why the outside investors that people keep bringing their hands about all the time when they're mentioned, one of the reasons why they're still on board, because they want to see what CIG does in the future beyond Star Citizen and Squadron 42. And I think that's really the distant future of CIG, is seeing what they can do with this engine.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Star Citizen 1.0. A lot of interesting revelations there for the kind of direction that they want to go in and what they want people to know they are working towards. One of the biggest, I think, for a lot of people, they think kind of hinted at this a few times, but a main storyline for Star Citizen, introducing people to the guilds and the factions, really just using it as a way to kind of introduce people to the world overall and guide them through the general gameplay. What do you guys think of this?
I'm a big fan.
I have opinions.
All right. Let's hear them.
That's what we're here for, man.
I have the lore guy has opinions on the story. We've known the story, the main thrust of the story of Star Citizen since they announced it back in 2012. They've kind of talked about it, and they just kind of reaffirmed what they were already talking about, which is the story. The story of Squadron 42 is the war against the Vanduul and what's going on, and the story of Star Citizen is the story of the future of an empire that's being torn apart by two different polar opposites, Earth and Terra.
Go Terra.
In the universe.
Sorry.
I'm with you. And the story, I like the fact that they're saying we're going to start adding the story to the game because it makes my job easier. But what I am concerned about is CIG moving away from the model they originally were talking about, which was a sort of emergent, sort of high-level storytelling where these events happen, players participate, and then it moves the needle one way or another, depending on what's going on, towards, Elder Scrolls Online or Final Fantasy XIV, where you're the chosen one going off and single-handedly saving the Empire, and like the players' choices are completely boiled down to, how many people did the bad side and how many people did the good side or something like that. That seems very, it seems too, I wouldn't say impersonal. It seems like the problem that even I remember Chris Roberts saying he had with MMOs, which was you'd go defeat the big bad evil guy, and you and your party would spend hours fighting or grinding against this guy, and you get this tense moments and you leave, and then only for like another party to come in. It's like an assembly line of just waiting for the guy to spawn and fight. It doesn't really feel personal. We wanted it to be a little bit different, and I feel like that's the direction they're going now based off that announcement, which is you're just gonna go save the Empire, yay. And I don't know, I'm mixed about that.
You don't trust them to be a little more complex than that?
I think they can be more complex than that, but I'm afraid that the temptation urge to hit schedule rather than hit quality is there. Where like we have to get this out in, by this point, we're gonna throw all these complicated ideas away because these complicated ideas require a lot of dev work and a lot of like overcomplication. We already have a complicated stuff. Let's leave that to the sandbox stuff, and let's just make the story work. And I I'm not okay with that one, but
Okay.
Well, we'll see.
Opposing views.
Yeah.
But they bring in the main storyline and kind of give you an introduction to a lot of the different gameplay elements that might be interesting to you, right? And having the reputation locked things, if I'm somebody that likes racing and I just want the fastest, fastest little Misk Razor, right? I want to be able to go through and try and unlock some of that, so it's going to get some progression elements. But yeah, I'd like to be able to meet specific NPCs in the universe that are specialists here, and that kind of hand-holding aspect of getting people into game loops that they might not have actually tried, right? Because there are people who have never touched a mining laser in their life, right? And other folks that all they ever do is PvP and dogfighting, and that's fine. They can play the game how they want, but they will have the opportunities there for progression within each of those aspects. That kind of bringing into the storyline, I think, is helpful. And yeah, I think it helps provide a little bit of a direction, like with power plays and stuff for that other space game that came out around the same time as Star Citizen was announced. And I see influences from other things like Helldivers 2 that's done a really great live service and your weekly missions and stuff. So I think it's an opportunity to bring in some of those elements and have it feel more dynamic and unique, and giving you fresh purpose on a regular cadence.
Yeah. I think the idea of just keeping people sort of informed of all of the different parts of the game is going to be a really good, not even side effect. They kind of hinted at this being a really big reason for a story. Just a good effect all around of having a story. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize I could go find these kinds of space stations way out here and do some loot diving for them. So that is a good call. It also, I guess, acts as like one big tutorial for the game that kicks you off and allows you to go get into the deeper sandbox gameplay with base building and stuff. But I totally understand the idea of like, how will they actually frame this story? Is it going to be just a very bare minimum story for the sake of being a tutorial, or is it going to be like a actual gripping tale of going through? Like, how much branching would it be if it's using all of the different guilds? Could you change your main story because you're more favorable to one guild or another?
They even talked about things like the fact that there's going to be two major, like there's going to be the kind of industrial guilds, and there's the two guilds which are the council and the I forget what is it, the mercenary guild, and those are going to be opposing each other. Like, how do you get rep with the mercenary guild and the council at the same time somehow? Like, there's questions I have about it. I like the idea that it's a tutorial. I like the idea of sending people all over the map. We're forcing them to learn a bunch of different things in order to get citizenship, but I don't like the idea that the main story is a tutorial, because that feels like it means that this main story doesn't matter, that the universe doesn't matter. And I'm a guy who likes the universe of Star Citizen, and for it to just be like, people be like, skip, I don't care, I don't want to. And that feels like you like CIG's grabbing someone and saying, you will learn this. And I'm going to force you to learn this. You're going to sit through cutscenes, and you can't skip them. And I feel like it has the opposite effect of what a story should do, which is immerse you in the universe.
But, and I think it's less of a tutorial and more of just like a very high level, just skimming the surface, surveying what's out there, but expecting to have significant amounts of depth underneath each of those, different departments or gameplay loops that someone who in that kind of high level survey sees something they're interested in, giving them the opportunity to go super in depth into that specific role and really making it their own gameplay at that point.
I'm wondering. Oh, go ahead, Ten.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think how I'm reading it is that it is going to be a stepping stone from Squadron 42 to the persistent universe, so that it will be for people. The dates, who knows exactly when or any of this is going to drop, but one obvious thing that lots of people are saying is that really, if they go big with Squadron 42, it sells millions of copies. They then want everybody to come to the persistent universe and spend all their money on spaceships. And so one way to do that would be to have them play a very narrative cinematic game, and then they can have something that's not maybe quite as structured and locked in as that, but it's a stepping stone to being released into persistent universe. And I think it is. I think it is the tutorial. It's the new player experience. It is the way to make this game, because the big problem with the game now is that it's impossible almost for new people to play the game. It's just, there's so much going on, and I think this is their real stab at getting that right. And I think it's actually probably critical that they get it right for the long-term health of the game, because they do not want people's onboarding experience to persistent universe to be as bad as it is now. I mean, Chris even mentioned it, and he said, we know it's bad, we know the new player experience is bad. And I think I personally am not that interested in this, and it will depend on how well the story is formed, and it's not something that I would think, I'd really want to do it. But if they can do a really good job, I think for new people coming into it, it will be vital, probably.
Well, I'm happy. I'm looking forward to getting some type of storyline with the game, because if we rewind, oh gosh, 4, 5, 6 years ago, with how many quest givers we had, or mission givers, it was pretty entertaining to just do those missions. And I hope that there's a lot more focus on less like tutorial approach and more on like, this is the actual story of what's going on. So
yeah,
I think that this would be a fantastic way to do it if they focus on more a narrative approach. It would add a lot of depth.
I think it's really interesting. Like, Star Citizen has incredibly interesting lore, and I know some people don't really care that much about it, but like the overall situation that humanity finds themselves in for the time that Star Citizen is set in, from like the I guess the bipolar situation with Earth and Terra, the ongoing war with the Vandul, the long, I guess not really forgotten Cold War with the Xi'an. Like, there's just a lot of interesting places where they can tie in little bits of information and lore to intertwine the story. And I love that they're looking to try and do that and draw people more into what makes it a little bit different of an IP. I do wonder.
Don't get me wrong. I will be doing handstands when that thing comes out. Like, trust me, there will be 15 videos when that thing comes out, all from me, all an hour long, breaking down who the various characters you see, what the different, like the Atoni Syndicate, the council and how they factor into it, all the like the drop kings, like a lot of these people they mentioned in that sort of lore stuff. I was like, I know those names. I know all of these names. They're all like, half of them have half a written paragraph somewhere. Some of them are more detailed. It's like, how do they connect? My brain. You know that meme of the Brazilian
exploding
of the woman who's looking and it's like just like different calculations.
Oh yeah.
Like, that was me trying to put it together.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping they walk that fine line of don't go off and beat the big bag evil guy to win the game.
Yeah. I hear you there. Especially because
they've talked about. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, especially because as they get more into making it like a hero story, the more it pushes people to do the exact same thing. Like, instead of being in a mission where you have to do something for the mining guild, you're in a mission where you have to mine the specific mineral that's going to save this planet. And then suddenly they have to like instance the area where that mineral is found. So there's a bunch of people going to the same place, but not seeing each other. And like, feels like it gets a little bit convoluted when it starts to become a hero story.
Yeah. How do you, Paul, especially, how do you feel about the idea that maybe once they've nailed their ability to do this sort of story content almost in the game, what do you feel about the idea that they'll maybe, as we get the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, that they'll drop more story and that the universe will move forward in history rather than just being stuck at the point that we're stuck?
Oh, 100%. Like CIG has effectively not been, well, one of the common refrains you'll hear, I think, from myself and a lot of people, I'm sure all of you agree, is that CIG isn't subtle. They have the subtlety of a rock. So they did an entire series back when the Kickstarter happened called the Time Capsules, and the Time Capsule illustrates the basic history of from today all the way up to Star Citizen start point. And at the end of that start point, like the last couple of those were things like the Vandul conflict, the Synth world, the Tavaran's status in the UEE, the struggles between Earth and Terra. There's like, 7 or the Xi'an Cold War ending, and what does that have to mean? There's a half a dozen, if not more, threads that they've built that they when talked about it, they said, we want the players to figure these out. We want the players to decide the fate of these situations. And so, we're not good. I don't think this is a one and done. I don't think 1.0 comes out and they don't have story content. I think pretty much every update or every other update is going to have more story content pushing the guilds forward or pushing the overall story forward. I think Star Citizen 1. I guess technically Star Citizen 2.0 is probably going to look a lot different from Star Citizen 1.0, just like any MMO does as it evolves, as it goes along. So,
well, they also talked about location-based gameplay too, like narrative stories and locations. They said they were going to be shorter, but they did talk about that.
Yeah, I actually would like to dive into that because one of the things I think that caught me most off guard in the Star Citizen 1.0 panel was this idea that they have sort of like an ongoing weekly updating conflict that you can be in part of as a group. You could probably have a hand in as like a solo or a mercenary or something, but just the general idea that like, and they only specified Pyro and Nyx in their example. I don't know how widespread this would be, but the idea that these more contested star systems would have ongoing, ever-changing things going on, and I do wonder how much they can expand that to be like, I don't remember, I think Hav0k, you were the one who said it, like in Helldivers, how they have this kind of ongoing push and pull war of this place has been taken over, fight back to get this place, how much they can do that in other systems or in other ways in Star Citizen, because there are a lot of underutilized and unclaimed systems in the lore that we'll probably see well after the release of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential for territorial control with that.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I wonder how they're going to break that down, but that'd be really cool.
But if you go back, they did the panel on the shield tokens and that relay network. You got your orbital support, you have the relay, and then you got the hub. right? And you've got to earn, those tokens through the events they provide, and that I think is going to provide some good evolving opportunities because it's a weekly resource that's consumed, right? So you may have large scale orgs that have it 80% of the time, right? But that 20% of the time, if you're not allied with them, you're going to have a rough time trying to do any business during those points.
Yeah.
So.
All right, let's talk about base building and the crafting. One of the more interesting parts, I think, of this is that they have now started to introduce material quality. This is not, I don't think anybody who's ever played an MMO isn't aware of this kind of a thing being in the game. But I do think that this was something that people weren't necessarily expecting to have in Star Citizen. What are your initial thoughts on the crafting system? Let's start with that.
I have a lot of thoughts if someone else wants to go first.
No, you should go first. This is your thing. Do it.
Industry man.
Yeah. Obviously, the material quality, I paid a lot of attention to what they told us there. When you're doing refining, you've got a primary material. That's what actually affects the output. You've got your secondary. The quality doesn't matter. It just it might cost you more. And then your catalysts. There's going to be hundreds of different resource types out there, and I think the way that the minerals and like the raw materials are going to be out, it's going to change a lot. We were going to have solids, gases, biological or collected stuff. So all of that kind of plays together. I think the blueprint system is going to be brilliant, right? Because you have a reputation based. If you saw the research to go from like a tier 1 to a tier 2, there are specific requirements. You have to craft at least 100 of these pistols, right? And you have to craft one with a higher fire rate than X, right?
I'm gonna insert myself right now. Did anyone else catch the El Nasir meme they pulled on that one?
No, I missed that.
So you all know the meme about the like one of the oldest writings we have in history is from a complaint letter about El Nasir's shitty copper. So what it was, the chat realized it was a meme because they said, "Oh yeah, I have a lot of this high quality aluminum, but only the really low value copper," and I'm just like, El Nasir strikes again in the 30th century. Low quality. Sorry,
taking us back.
Yeah. So our ability to craft new items up to tier 3, as well as specific subcomponents and things, getting bonuses based on a crafting recipe. That's going to go kind of into your library, I think, is a huge opportunity to specialize, and really it takes it from being like the developer-owned economy. I think you're going to have players that invest a significant amount of time, get their own space stations or ground-based shops, and are selling these highly specialized, highly sought-after components that are only available for people who have like literally thousands of hours in a specific gameplay loop. So I feel like that's going to take it from being just the developers and kind of that live service. They're feeding you the content. If you're out there trying to do trying to base build, somebody might have a better opportunity for you that might be a little higher security. So gives players a lot more control over that aspect, and maybe even an introduction or a recruiting tool, right? If you have a fantastic selection of things people want, but it's locked behind your org commitments, that's going to help growth and recruiting as well.
How do you feel? So this actually is something I wanted to clarify because I didn't fully understand. They said that blueprints wouldn't be a physical thing. They would be digital things that could be found on physical items. And once you had it in your library, it stayed in your library forever. Did it sound like that still meant you could like give somebody else the blueprints, or how could you share that knowledge?
I don't think you will be able to give the blueprint. It would have to be earned through reputation or found in specific conditions. So they talked about like the instance dungeon type thing. The communal works at Area 18, that completing those types of items, depositing or dropping off a specific amount of resources to the United Resource Workers, like earning blueprints through that, and then also being able to research and upgrade with those same type of requirements.
So
I don't think, yeah.
well, in that case, what if you're in the party with a bunch of people? Like, let's say you got 5 or 6 people with you, and you guys come across this like nice, for the sake
good
of
question.
historian, you've got like this nice tier 5 Redeemer blueprint that pops up, and everybody wants it because the Redeemer is like the best ship in the game, right? How do you decide who picks it up?
It's a great question.
You fight each other for it?
Great question.
Yeah.
And
PvP.
as someone who was like mostly a solo playing World of Warcraft dungeons way back in the day, trying to get in as a pickup group and always like getting out selected for the loot, it's a tough aspect to talk about. But at the same time, you can have your orgs that are working together, and it may be that everyone earns that blueprint at successful completion because you've met the requirements, right? Or it's a huge reputation boost within that reputation bar that everyone who's kind of on track there, it checks the box with the requirements, and maybe there's 4 or 5 different boxes they need to check still, but once you've completed it, that's kind of the reward, and it may not be as unique.
They'll have to work it out. There might be if you're doing some sort of instance content, it might just be the reward for completing the instant content that everybody gets. But
Right.
yeah, say you stumble across something in a random derelict ship, you might have to work it out. It might be the first person to. That's the sort of stuff that they didn't go into detail in, that they might not even know yet, that they're going to have to probably work out over the next however many years.
And that's also the idea that it's like an instance reward that everybody in the party that goes into that dungeon gets, I think also is a change from what a lot of people expected in more kind of sandbox environments where you would just find something and then you get that, as opposed to going into like a sectioned out space and getting a specific reward when you unlock the end of that space, which is sort of what they were getting at with that municipal rewards kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating thing that we talked about, the fact that they've gone for big end game sandbox content, but they also at the same time massively expanded the scope of the kind of theme park style MMO stuff. There's so many more now. If you're interested in this, go over to this instance bit of content, go to the municipal works bit, and the story. It's bizarre that they've almost just gone. It's kind of what they said. They said this game is for everybody. They've gone, we're going to go really wide in this direction for the MMO end game sandbox side, and then we're also going to try and put as much theme park style stuff that you can go and do as a group. They've just gone, we're going to do everything basically, and that might influence the amount of time that it takes to get to, but it does mean that everybody should have stuff to do at least.
Yeah. And we'll see how well all of those things can be done with that kind of a model. Going back to the crafting, did anybody else have things that jumped out to them initially about the crafting system? Okay, I'll go.
Go ahead. All I was gonna say is I'm looking forward to the new crafting system in general because it screams Star Wars Galaxies. And for anyone who didn't experience Star Wars Galaxies, player crafting was essential to the economy because it forced players to interact with each other to get good gear. Like the best gear was only made by players.
Right.
And I really hope that's still the case here with Star Citizen, where like, if you really want to get good quality crafting, you're going to need to go to the person who is a really good gunsmith.
Yeah.
Somebody who's just really good. So
they touch up on that too as well. They said that crafting will be the best gear that you can get.
Yeah, and that's great because I am a big fan of putting people together. And if someone can be like, I can be the best armor maker in this side of Terra, and so people go, hey, you need to go to Paul because he's got like tier 5 shit you need to get. That's because it allows for specialization to matter rather than just what like in a lot of like crafting and survival games where it's just a step on the road to end game content where people who just like who don't want to craft have to learn to craft because it's the only way they can get good gear. Now it's more of it's literally something you can go to somebody else and get that, a guy sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and I love that they're approaching it like Star Wars Galaxies. I think that was the best thing that they could do. They kind of combined ideas from Eve and ideas from Star Wars Galaxies and said, let's go for this and make it something amazing. And I love it.
And
it's also, very quickly, it's also almost endless content for people who just want to grind. We often say, what do you do in the game? You've got your ships, what do you do? Well, you've now got thousands of items that they can keep adding on top of that you can grind forever.
Yeah, laying it out that people are not necessarily just doing things to get more money to buy more ships is pretty important for them to go over, which I appreciate. The thing that I really like about the crafting system is kind of something you guys just touched on, which is that it helps to bolster a player economy, and the idea that you can build a base and that base is dedicated to crafting a certain thing, and then they didn't go into details about how people would find out about that, but I assume there will be ways for you to put out beacons and notifications to people that certain things are available in this place, and those people come there and
trade chat.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of showed that in the social panel, but like there's buying and trading going on there, and it makes me wonder. They didn't specifically say again that the economy would be driven 90% by AI and 10% by players, and I do wonder if that's something that's starting to shift given how much they emphasized player crafting and economy.
That's how it seemed. Yeah, I'll let somebody else speak, but it did seem as though that's one of the things I was saying about earlier, how there's a shift in vision, shifting away from some of the things that happened in the past. I think that's one of the things that the kind of all the old quantum stuff is really up in the air now. We don't know if that is the intent at all, and the amount of NPC it seemed as though I was saying that basically the players are going to dominate the economy, which they'll have to work out ways to kind of regulate and to stop certain people or certain groups from just completely taking over. But the way they spoke about it, it seemed as though the kind of heavy that they would control the economy by having so many NPCs. That seems to have gone, but maybe they'll clarify.
And go ahead.
I think it's largely going to be player controlled or influenced in a lot of ways. And I think what they did is just they made the back end system kind of like work with NPCs completely without having much player influence, so it can still progress and do things without the necessary need for players. But I think player decisions and like choices are really going to be more powerful than what the overall system is capable of.
I wonder about it because there's the base building side of things, and clearly they're expecting pretty big freaking bases, bigger than I thought we were going to be seeing. And then there's also the work that they're doing for points of interest with Starkitect in building out a lot more points of interest around the game. And then we go back and we look at what they've said about quantum in the past and how you'll have factories and refineries and shops and mines that are all tied into each other, and supply and demand that bounces between them. I wonder how the base building stuff ties into the economy, and whether, because they mentioned StarSim would drive the economy, but how much of quantum is still within StarSim? How much does that also factor into base building? Let's talk about. I see nobody had any thoughts on that. Let's talk about
the words on my part.
Yeah, it's a big problem, and I agree with you. The whole there's a lot of balance issues they're gonna have to work out if they're going this direction. So.
Yeah. Let's talk more about the economy, because that's something that they kind of just like touched on very barely. Do you guys think that they would still consider things like virtual AI, which was, I think, a big part of quantum people were looking forward to, and I guess they kind of talked about the probability volumes. Do you think they're kind of moving on from that, or are they just sort of like, oh, you guys all know what that was, we're not gonna really mention it anymore?
I mean, they talked about StarSim a little bit. They did talk about things linking back into the StarSim, and StarSim still mattering. I think it's just more of a, that because it's such a high level overview of what they were doing with 1.0, it was less of a focus, and they wanted to talk more about the player side of things, especially with crafting and such. So,
yeah. And we all saw the Tony Z presentation on Quanta and how it's simulating the back end and responding to player-driven events. I don't know if they wanted to kind of dive into that with the selection of panels they had this year, especially since the focus was like less about how the economy sim is going to be working and more about how the game's going to turn into this 1.0 space MMO masterpiece, right? And that's what they wanted to really highlight this time.
The Tony Z memes will only intensify this year.
Well, I
Yep.
don't know if they will. I think they might drop off because I think he's done. I think you talked about the fact that he's still at the company working on other stuff. I think it's quite apparent from the economy discussions with the economy team. He's got nothing to do with it anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't think. I don't think he's got anything to do with it, and I think we're seeing the Rich Tyra going in a slightly different direction. Part of this, and I just don't think some of the things like the virtual AI and the quanta stuff. I think it's just gone. I think it's a theatres of war situation where they're going to just not talk about it until they one day say, oh, no, we're not doing it like that anymore.
As Sean Tracy comes on to talk about FOIP, and people are just like, yeah, but what about theaters of war? Yeah, I mean, it sounded like he had moved on from economy stuff. I do wonder what's going on with that, but I don't fault the guy for not wanting to like go on stage or be in the limelight to talk about these things when really the stuff that he works on is so high level that anything he's touching isn't really getting shown that quickly anyways. I think that's kind of the similar position as what Ian Leyland does, which is very art focused and directed, and we've seen him talk about things in the past like building interiors, which are now being discussed as the municipal works, and we've seen him come on to talk about the space stations for players during this CitizenCon, and that was... Man, they mentioned that briefly at last year's CitizenCon that like, oh yeah, you might be able to build bases in space too. We'll talk about that at some point. And then they just went and spent like 30 minutes talking about it during this CitizenCon. We touched on that a bit earlier in this show, but what do you guys think of player-built space stations?
I was underwhelmed, to be honest. I'm just kidding. That was...
I was going to say, are you serious?
Speak for yourself.
There was, I will say, a collective, like, staged levels of jaw-dropping each time we got new revelations on these. You know, they talked about the first section, that supply pod. But, man, that was amazing to see. You know, you're going up there with a Pioneer, you're starting off, and it builds out from there. And the amount of modularity they're going to have within those stations. Like, honestly, every single time we got a new step, like, my jaw was on the floor. I thought, like, first off, like, the initial pod, it was fantastically well done, and we saw visuals within there, so the art quality is already going, you know, up to the level we expected. Some of it was still kind of that design doc style, but, you know, we're gonna have buildings and corridors, you know, kind of rooms and corridors within the main station, and then the ability to expand that to get more of the major hard points and your minor hard points. And the level of customization you have is going to be brilliant. The one risk I wanted to that's always out there is they said, yes, people will be able to attack your space station. So for me, I say, okay, well, do I put together you know, kind of this cooperative network of multiple orgs that we all kind of go together on one space station as like a grand marketplace that we all kind of have shared defense and this alliance there? Or do I go just with a Red Legion group and put up my space stations everywhere and tell everybody else, like, yeah, sure, if you want to buy our stuff, like, help defend us?
I also think it's interesting, a lot of the response to it was, oh, I'm not interested in orgs, this stuff doesn't bother me. But I do think there's opportunity for solo players or players of small groups to be involved in these space stations. One of the things that I realized when I was rewatching it again was he mentioned making space stations public, basically hosting a space for people to come and possibly make their home or sell their stuff or buy stuff and do their own business. You don't necessarily have to be in an org to benefit from this stuff. Is that what you guys were getting?
Yeah.
Not primarily. It definitely wasn't the primary focus, was it? The primary focus was this is end game content for all.
Yeah, that was the primary where they were going with it. But did you get the idea that solo players were locked out of this?
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
I do think that solo players can participate, but I think that you're not going to see solo players building their own space station.
Yeah,
it's just not how that's going to work.
Yeah.
None of us will be alive in the amount of time that it would take that to happen, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think the idea is more that this is something that I realized that CIG might be shooting for a while ago, which is when they're doing base building, what they might be shooting for is something to the effect of like towns where an org might control a town, but because that org needs resources, other groups will be flocking to that area to give them those resources because they may not have access to them. And so people might build like a warehouse or a hab somewhere inside this base that this org creates so that they can always come back to it and just naturally growing together because of the collective security. But, you know.
Did you at any point when they were doing this, like Red Monster, you said just multiple levels of jaw hitting the floor. Did you feel like at any point they were like doing too much with the space stations?
Yes.
I honestly no. I think what's going to happen is they're going to balance it out between a very high resource cost, as well as the ongoing maintenance, the maintaining security, defenses. Like I said, the risk of loss is still there. It's not 100%, safe. But if we also tie that back into the social stuff that they talked about with orgs and being able to set permission levels within those space stations based on org affiliation or alliances, and I think that's where a solo player is able to come in. If you say, hey, like if you want to progress and earn rep, like join or like contribute to specific goals, and those who are in that network are going to get rewarded with access to red super secret surveyors, scanning sensor shop.
It's actually a really interesting idea.
Yeah. So a solo player can still come buy and sell, but maybe there's like a higher cost for that. I have one shop set up as a public view and one shop set up as a discounted org only, that type of thing. That though it ties some of the other panels together in a pretty neat way.
Mm-hmm. So. 10 pound, you sounded like you had some feelings.
Only from a technical side of thing, I think. As it they unveiled more and more and more, I started to think, how are they going to make this work from a server meshing and shard point of view? And interestingly, also from a systems point of view, because I was like 5 systems is fine, but then as you start to think that there's going to be maybe these large orgs basically dominating around certain planets with these stations, you think, well, I don't know if 5 stations is enough really for people to fight over. And then you think, well, how many people will be on a shard? How many servers can be meshed together to make these stations work? And you start to think, my opinion is that as they kept going and kept expanding and then gave us the full thing where you've got the multiple bases all together, how quickly can they get that working? Because it's really a massive vision. And I think it's good that we know where they're heading, but I think we have to be clear that when they said 12 to 18 months for base building, that doesn't include the space stuff, I don't think anyway, because they said that what's the ship?
Pioneer.
Pioneer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Pioneer is the way you build these things, and that's not going to be delivered with the initial release of base building.
Right.
That's only being started now. So I think everybody should maybe just take a breath, just because it's a huge. Because they were huge. You could get hundreds of people on those.
Yeah, those
on
were massive.
Stations. And then there was multiple ones next together. And then you're thinking, how many players can you have fighting in a battle outside of this station from a technical point of view, from a server meshing side, and then also from a client side performance? You can't. The PCs as we have them right now can't cope with massive space battles very well. If you play Xenothreat, you'll know. Even if you've got top end hardware, it's a real slideshow. And so. Or I started to get concerned that they'd maybe just gone a bit too big, but maybe I'm just being pessimistic.
I think the balancing in the shared universe was a big aspect, because if everyone's able to go out and build their own space stations, right, and obviously we're gonna have like 75,000 versions of Test Squadron space stations just out there everywhere, right?
Lord.
But how is that going to work in a shared environment where is the night sky just going to be lit up with this kind of erector set lattice of space stations above every planet?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm a bit concerned at CIG's kind of insistence that they have really well developed star systems that they deliver us each time. So even though Castro's only got one major landing zone, I don't understand why alongside those 5 first star systems, considering that they're giving us all the tools to build out a system ourselves, why are they not just giving us empty systems? They can just be not ones in lore. They can literally say, oh, a jump point has appeared, and you go off and there's a completely empty system that then the big orgs can spread out over. I don't know why the CIG want to almost have like a gimmick with each system. We've obviously got, there's going to be Vandal raids coming into Nyx, and there's going to be all the seal stuff, the shield token stuff in Nyx. I think at some point they're going to have to just give us a load of systems and say, go on, spread out and make the universe your own, because that's kind of what they talked about here. But then it's still quite controlled by the art and by what they're wanting to do.
But and imagine getting a survey mission to go out and scan this nebula. You find a jump point, you traverse it, and on the opposite side, you see the Garden Intergalactic building a space station to start defending that exit point, right? That it's an entirely uncharted system, and someone's like midway through trying to start claiming it, right?
Yeah. Paul, we got systems that they can throw in as little empty spots like that. He's muted.
I'm muted, so you wouldn't hear us. Me tape clicky clack. There's plenty of systems. Like there's one that's actually not too far away. Well, I guess that one's a protoplanetary system, so it doesn't have it. But like, there's plenty of systems like Toe Hill, which have minimal lore. It's mostly been used as a smuggling ring. There's just the problem about a lot of the systems that CIG has that are low, and also has a jump point to Castra. So it's like right there, right on the like super easy to get to. The problem is that any location that has like habitable worlds in the universe of Star Citizen, people live there. So the places you'll find are mostly uninhabited rocks rather than places that are full of like you can take your helmet off sort of situation. Though again, CIG could easily just add a new system that comes out of nowhere. Like they discover a jump point to this location and it's got a habitable world. Go nuts.
I think that's what they'll have to do at some stage. That they don't need to provide us really detailed landing zones at every place. There doesn't. Yeah. I think it's a much more fun idea to completely colonize a system from scratch. I just think that's. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, and it's not like jump points don't just get discovered all the time. They're discovered, like Stanton, for instance, was discovered 100 years ago. Like in lore, it's not like they've discovered everything they could. They could easily just add a new system if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So,
I think a lot of people are hoping they do. That's what a lot of people imagined exploration would be about. You mentioned the Pioneer. I thought an interesting take was that they said that the Pioneer would not come out with the first version of base building, but then also kind of hinted at the idea that the Pioneer would be out within the next 12 to 14 months. So do you guys think that places base building on a shorter timeline than 12 months? I mean, he said 12 to 18, of course, but like, I don't know.
I can start with this one.
The Legionnaire technically isn't out yet, so can't really go by that.
Yeah.
I think what we saw here, the things that he said specifically, which were, and we have to go use weasel words, chat, okay, and comments down below. Remember, CIG uses weasel words.
He promised.
Yeah, he didn't promise 1.0 in 12 to 18 months. He promised monster hunting and base building. He didn't promise space stations in 12 to 18 months. He promised base building.
He said 12 to 18 months, which means everything at the panel, all the panels,
including
is going to happen. 100%.
So I think based off of that, I could see base building coming in as soon as early next year. Based off of the status it currently was, like the ones they were showing off, the small versions, I could see them putting that in March, June of next year.
Okay.
It doesn't. I don't. But I mean, we're not talking anything huge. We're talking about a little push cart that has like a button and then an overlay. We're not talking about like anything universal here. And I also think they're going to be wipes and stuff like that, so people won't be able to keep their bases there. It's mostly testing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I don't think we're going to be building ships in Star Citizen 4.4 or whatever that is. And I think the I also can see early next year monster hunting. Apparently, the devs were talking about it, that they were testing it internally, and that was from an internal test. And I had Execute rock around and talk to a couple devs and ask them about it, and who were involved in like the mission systems. And they're like, yeah, we played it. I played it. That was just the best version we had. There's other versions that they're talking about other times that happened and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a system that they're ready to go, like as soon as they can get everything else ironed out. So I think what they said in the next 12 to 18 months is fine. Anything else? Absolutely no idea. I couldn't tell you. So
yeah, and that's
I think I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We were talking about space stations, and the biggest one of them all is that they said you can build capital ships, and they proceeded to show off the bangle.
Right.
Are we going to be making bangles?
The bangle.
oh god, you're gonna ask that's a
I'm gonna
that's a
ask the
hot
question.
button. That's a hot button question in the community.
It's not a question of will we. I think it's when will we. I think is probably the question. That they can't show that and then expect the community to think anything apart from the fact that that is the end goal for orgs, to build their own Bengal. That will not be insured, and if you lose it, I'm sure you just have to start from scratch again. There'll be some sort of stuff to keep orgs interested. It will be a significant thing if you lose it, but how many years is that away?
Just like civilian groups building the second most powerful thing known to humanity in their backyard.
Well, yeah,
it's crazy.
I mean, it won't be in UAE space, will it? It will have to be in the unlawful systems. That
would worry me if I was the UEE.
I was that's actually one of the discussions we had in my Discord about it, which was like, would it be realistic that the UEE would allow someone to A, get their hands on the plans for a Bengal carrier, and B, let them build it in a neighboring system? Like, and so, I mean, there's lots of potential interesting things. Like, yeah, you go to a middle of nowhere abandoned system, and the UEE finds out
they start
that everyone's
you.
building the Bengal, they'll start raiding you because like they don't want you to build their do it. I like that idea because it's like
cool.
A Bengal carrier should be the hardest thing you could make. It should take you months, if not years of preparation. It should take hundreds, if not thousands of people. And it should be dangerous to try to build while everyone else is around you. Like, you know, we're talking, they said end game. I'm expecting like 2050, you know, kind of things. Like,
and you should only be able to make one.
Yeah.
I'd love to continue, but I've got a hard cutoff on my time today. But been a great chatting with you guys. I want to bounce out.
Thank you for joining us, Red Monster. Appreciate you, man.
Hey, Red.
Thank you for the invite and for throwing this together. I'll catch you guys later.
Catch you later, man.
See ya.
That's actually, so I was gonna go to one last part of CitizenCon to talk about, and that is Squadron 42. They've finally showed uncut gameplay of the game, and it's only what, 8 years since the last delay, so it took a little while. But what did you guys think of the gameplay?
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it was my expectation. I was gonna say the same thing. It was my expectations. It exceeded my expectations in some, but it met my expectations where I was hoping it for it to be. So.
Yeah, it exceeded my expectations. I thought the writing would be more campy, more consistently.
Tomato. One of the things that the chat kept bringing up when I was watching it, where they're like, "This is like I'm watching Halo 1, the Pillar of Autumn again," and I kept thinking, "Space Tomato, Space Tomato, Space Tomato, Space Tomato." I
was like, that's what I wasn't trying to.
My brother in Halo.
I was trying not to say it, but I was like, "Ooh, fight the elites!" Like, where are the grunts? Where's the freaking? That's actually one of the things that I find. Me and Mrs. Tomato were actually talking about this yesterday. One of the things that I find to be a little bit off-putting that I hope they can fix is the Vanduul are not scary enough. And I feel like one of the things in Halo they were able to do was make the elites scary because you had
menacing.
because you had the other aliens that were like the fodder. You know, you could just throw them in and make them easy to kill. But for the Vanduul, it's like, okay, we have to figure out a way to make them both exciting to fight because there's a bunch of them, but also menacing and scary because one of them takes a lot to kill. And I would like to see them feel more intimidating to encounter.
100% agree. Yeah, that scene on the bridge where they're rushing you, they're just too squishy. You should have to have a grenade launcher to knock them down, surely. Like, or at least maybe a
multiple phases.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I completely agree. They were swarming you, which is not what they're sold as. I mean, Paul, you can say from a law point of view, they're supposed to be absolutely terrifying as an individual person or vandal, and they just weren't. They just went down too quickly, and yeah, it's obviously a demo. It's a few years out in terms of balancing. There were other balancing issues, I think, in terms of some of the turret gameplay and the ships moving really slowly. But I felt the same. I felt the Vandal they just weren't what they have always been kind of built
up to be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Why do you say that? Because there were a lot of people that were super critical about the turret gameplay. And I'm like, I get it. Yes, it's slow, but we're like 2 years out still.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's some little things they can fix there.
I think the interesting part and where it could get, and we'll get onto Space Tomato's favorite topic here, is that the Master Mode's influence in terms of slowing all the ships down, you can clearly see in that sequence, in that they are moving pretty slowly, and maybe it's deliberate so that it's your first experience playing the game and you can actually shoot the things. But I just felt that it felt, from a gameplay point of view, I felt looking at it, I was like, this is not challenging whatsoever, and it's really quite slow. And yeah, I mean, I made a video and I made the error of saying, I wonder if that is partly down to the fact that Chris now is a man in his 50s, and he wants to be able to play his own game. And there is a fair point to say that people of all ages have backed this project, and we shouldn't have some sort of crazy thing where the ships are just flying everywhere and you can't hit them. But I felt it looked a bit tough. It looked a bit stodgy, a bit boring. I think there was points where the ships were barely moving, and you think, oh, that isn't your sci-fi experience normally. When you're watching a film or you're playing other games, you've got things flying everywhere, and in those sections of the game, it was pretty slow.
The two things that were problematic, and a lot of people were pointing out in chat, they're pointing out it was a tutorial. Why are y'all being so hard on tutorial? Which I get, but you can make a tutorial while also giving the feel, and the feel was, why isn't anybody else shooting the things I'm shooting? Like I was, the guy was shooting, shoot the things. It was like he was the only gunner shooting at that target, and the other two gunners weren't doing anything. It felt very much like, what's going on with the rest of the crew? Am I the only person controlling this thing? It should feel more like you're getting assistance from other gunners. It didn't feel like that. The other thing was there's a way of dealing with tutorial while they're swarming you, because you could just reduce the number of Vandal who are coming at you and make them take them harder and longer to kill and those kind of things. There are ways you could balance this out to make him feel more menacing.
I think it wasn't just a tutorial; it was a prologue, in the sense that it was also there to bring people in and make them excited. And one of the things that's missing most strongly from this being a prologue that represents the entirety of Squadron 42 is you don't fly a single ship, which is a lot of the excitement of what this game could be. So I feel like it could pick up some of the excitement in being a turret gunner in order to make up for the fact that you're not flying a ship, which is what people are expecting to get into. And that's part of the story, of course, but that first level, that first hour, could be, especially if they release this as a demo at some point to get people more interested, it could be that defining difference of, hey, this is really freaking exciting, I'm going to play it, versus I'm going to watch somebody play this on YouTube because it makes for a really good movie. Like, the cinematics were exciting as hell, and I think most of the gameplay was also pretty interesting. But yeah, the turret section probably could have seen, I think, maybe some more, I guess not chatter per se, but more interplay with some of the other ships flying around, possibly. I don't know. But
do you want to go back and watch the cinematic, that they uploaded?
Dude, yes. Yes.
It looks so good. I will also say two things. One, it's a Chris Roberts game. No one, I guess because it's been a long time, Chris Roberts was Hideo Kojima before Hideo Kojima was Hideo Kojima. There is on YouTube, you can find it, a Wing Commander 4 movie, and the Wing Commander 4 movie is 20 hours. It's just 20 hours of cutscenes. So there's going to be a lot of cutscenes in a Chris Roberts game. The hope is, because this was a prologue, that a lot of those cutscenes are just kind of establishing the universe, and then in the future, the prologue is the cutscenes are going to be more focused around your character decisions and actions and stuff like that. But we'll see. But yeah, that like it said, like a lot of people are going a little crazy on it. I'm like, this seems like Mass Effect or Halo. Like that's what it felt like. A lot of that sort of establishing stuff. So
yeah,
it was unbelievable. It was genuinely like I was watching and thinking. I was sat there in the crowd and I was just thinking, I just did not expect them, because considering what they had last year, they've upped quite a lot from last year as well. It was a spectacular showcase for the game, but the game still, I think, needs a bit of, and that's why we're 2 years out at least. Isn't it? So.
Oh, and I've been corrected by chat. It was 4 hours long, not 20 hours, but it's 4 hours of cutscenes. So, yeah.
It was a 13-minute. I think the longest cutscene in that prologue was 13 minutes. And then when I looked up some of the other games that have long cutscenes, and I actually was surprised to see what's it called, Quantum Break on there. I didn't realize that it had such long cutscenes, but I guess that makes sense how they kind of paired it with a TV show. But it is a thing. Like there are definitely game companies and or game lines of games that like kind of value themselves. They pride themselves on telling a movie kind of story instead of a game kind of story. And if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of people who will just watch video games to watch somebody else play and cut out all the busy parts because it plays like a movie. And video game stories can be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see, I think, more of a stealth section in that area where you didn't have a gun and you were creeping through the ship. I think they could have leaned a little bit into some Alien Isolation vibes there and maybe felt like you were kind of hiding from the Vanduul a bit more. I think that would have helped to bring up the tension. Loved the Zero-G segment, though. That was, I think, very atmospheric. The gunplay was okay. I think, in general, it looks like a game that I'm going to love to play. It doesn't look like the best game that's ever released or anything like that, but for somebody who wants sci-fi games or wants games that are held in space, there's like a handful of good cinematic space stories you can get over the last decade, and it's nice to see another one with a high budget, a serious cast, and some writing chops put into it to get to experience.
Yeah.
Do you think that? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go.
Do you think that based on the prologue that the game is going to be widely pretty popular, that people will be very interested in?
Yeah. PC players, yeah. I mean, Wing Commander sold like 3 million something copies in 19 something.
The cast alone is going to make it. Yeah, 1900s. Yeah. Gosh, no. My kids sometimes say that. They say back in the 1900s. It's like,
oh, that's terrible.
No,
you're able, man.
IGN put up a their own copy of it basically, and the comments, as I had a quick flick through on YouTube, were pretty positive. I think the dislike ratio was pretty good as well. So I think people are like, oh, that's Gary Oldman. Oh, wow, that's this guy. I think there's a sense where the cast and the visuals are going to carry it a significant distance on their own, because
as long as the gameplay,
as long as the gameplay is decent and maybe slightly better than decent, good. I think the other elements that CIG have invested in, I think, will take it quite a long way.
That's fair, yeah. And them just posting about it on Twitter. I remember when Mark Hamill posted about it on Twitter way freaking back in the day, like 5 or 6 years ago, and people were like, is this a new Netflix series? I'm going to watch this. And you're like, oh, my sweet summer child. No, this is the Netflix series in 8 years.
Yeah. And I think that we're primed. The market is primed currently for a Mass Effect sort of successor. And Mass Effect is A, fallen off, and B, the new one is nowhere to be found. We have no updates. We haven't updated updates for years. And if CIG plays this right, they could easily swoop up a lot of people's like hopes for a space opera sci-fi game like Mass Effect or Halo.
Yeah. That's what I've been waiting for, man. That's what brought me to Star Citizen originally. I finished Mass Effect 3, and I was like, Star Wars 1313 had been canceled. Freaking Prey 2 was canceled. I was like, I need a space game, and this is what I found.
Such a great game.
Yeah, really is, except for that ending. We don't talk about that, though.
Let's be fair. When they did the extended cut, it made it a lot better than it used to be. But yes,
when I played 1 through 3 back to back. It made sense 1 to 3. I can understand why when you just played 3 after playing 1 and 2, it kind of sucked. But like playing it back to back, I was like, this is fine. If I understand what's going on, this is cool. But I also had the extended cut, so it was a little different.
Yeah.
That's what made it great. And then, sorry, completely off topic here, but the final like Citadel DLC that they gave just made it just that much better.
It's a good sending off. Yeah. They did a good job with that, and I'd be interested to know if CIG ever is going to consider DLCs for Squadron 42 or just move forward with their episode 2 and the stuff they want to do.
That is the DLC.
I think that.
So, do you guys think that, Paul? I listened to your Captain's Table talk about this, but the idea of Squadron 42 being a success, or just kind of a puff of air that doesn't really go anywhere. I did not rhyme on purpose there. That was also a rhyme. Ew. The idea that it kind of just passes under the radar or is a success for CIG, how do you think that might affect the company itself, the way they approach Star Citizen? Will they move on to the sequel? Like, what do you think is the possibilities there?
I think they have such low stakes for it. Because if it fails, okay. Like, as long as Star Citizen's doing fine. There's no real, like, first off, it can't fail. It's in the sense of like the traditional, like complete, utter financial failure that it's just more, I don't think because they've already spent the money in developing it. And I don't think it's going to be bad. I don't think it's going to be atrociously bad. But I think the failure is more of does it meet expectations? And is it going to get people who are not playing Star Citizen already to sign up to play the game? That's really the stakes. And if CIG manages to get over that hump, then everything we've seen and everything they've talked about seems like they're really going for trying to make it. Obviously, they're not trying to make a bad game, but like they seem to be very critical of their own game enough to the point where they're trying to improve upon it here and there to really try to make it as good as they possibly can. And that seems to indicate that it's probably going to succeed. And if Star Citizen succeeds, even just, or Squadron 42 succeeds just a little enough that it gets enough mainstream attention or a little bit of mainstream attention, it has the ability to build up. Because unlike other games, which have to make all their money back in day one or the first week, they have the luxury of letting it sit and letting people come in to play it, and then also to release it to other venues like consoles or Steam over time. And then that will bring up more, it becomes a money over time maker rather than an instant cash infusion like a lot of games need. So,
evergreen.
Yeah. They have a lot of advantages going into it because of the Kickstarter model, because of the crowdfunding model they did. So
that's true. 10-Pound, you sounded like you had some different thoughts.
Well, I think the only concern is that if it isn't good and it whatever fail, you're right. Failure in this context is not the same as some other games, is it? Like you say, they're not having to suddenly make loads of money back. But if it does fail and it isn't well reviewed, I think the brand of CIG and of Star Citizen, it will be. This is their pretty much their one chance to be like, oh, it wasn't a scam all along, and we didn't just waste $700 million and all those comments that come out. I think this is their chance to be like, we actually did it. You've got to shut up now. Like, it's good. And I think if it's bad, the brand image for CIG and for the company and for Star Citizen as an extension of that will be probably very hard to turn that around, if that makes sense. I think it could be. I think Star Citizen is already still very confusing to people out there. A lot of people do still think it's not real, that nothing exists. And I think if the single player part of it, which is what people think it is, Squadron is, I think if it's bad, I think there is trouble on the medium to long term kind of future for the game. I think they'll struggle to come back from it from a reputational point of view.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a lot less concerns on that, though, to be honest, with the fact that we have Dave Hav0k and this is Chris Roberts' magnum opus. This is going to be the game for him. He's going to sign off after that. In my opinion, I think that.
How many video games have Oscar winners in them?
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah.
Like that's I mean, Gary Oldman didn't win the Oscar before like he had won it after he'd gotten it started Squadron 42, but like we're not talking about a bunch of no-name stars. We're talking about people who know them and all this. So like there's
A lot.
Serious.
and based off of that prologue, they didn't just show up to collect a check. They were there to act.
Yeah.
Like
it's really good. I think the only thing at this stage that still remains and has remained throughout the whole of both projects is the performance stuff.
Yeah.
Because obviously we saw some crashes, which I'm not that fussed about, but there will still be, as long as Star Citizen is a buggy mess, on one hand, there will be concerns about people. If so many PC games over the last few years have released and been atrociously unoptimized and completely broken in some ways, and they really don't want to fall at that hurdle. I think that one particularly, if it looks unbelievably stunning, the acting is good, the story looks good, the gameplay looks fine. I think probably the next 2 years is about ironing out those glitches that we saw, the face changes and Jillian walking around with a gun that's not in her arms.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. They don't want to go down as like a Skyrim type experience where it's like it's so visually stunning, but it's really buggy. Does that make sense?
Bethesda.
Yeah.
So, final then question for you is, do you think that console players will ever see this game?
Yes.
Yes.
100% they're going to see it. I don't see CIG not releasing this to consoles just because every single Wing Commander game that Chris Roberts made it to consoles. Maybe not the day one. I think a lot of people are assuming it's going to come out day one to consoles. I don't think that's probably going to happen. There's no evidence of it because for those of you who don't know, consoles and PCs, while consoles are still becoming more like PCs than they were in the past, they're still a different beast. You have to kind of develop towards a console in order to do that. And there's been no real indication of them doing that in the way of like optimizing the game for consoles specifically.
Right.
So they're either going to need a team like, ironically, Firesprite or other teams that are either they're gonna hire, or the like Microsoft or Sony will hire for them to port the game over into the consoles, and then they will support it going forward with fixes and updates and stuff like that.
when you Google it, it says console game.
And there's no signs of that happening at this stage. There's no hints that they've got a team, because as we see, the PC version of the game isn't done. And obviously it's quite unusual to go from PC to console. It's relatively common to go from console to PC. So yeah, I agree. It will definitely happen at some stage, as long as it does well on PC, as in they might not bother if it's an absolute flop, which none of us think will happen. But yeah, but it could be some time. And also there is real questions around whether it will run on at least the Xbox. What is it? What's the low-powered one?
The S? Series S?
S, yeah.
Yeah.
There'll be questions around, because that's struggling with a lot of games right now, and this obviously looks how it looks. It looks stunning, and there'll be questions around what resolution that in particular can run it at. And
yeah, those will be questions for you, dude.
Well, yeah.
You're the YouTube channel for that.
I forgot about Xbox.
I was gonna say, like you, in your experience, like right now, how optimized is Star Citizen? Could it be run on any of those sort of older hardware like that we have? In because let's be honest, the hardware in consoles is usually 5 to 10 years out of date compared to whatever PC is at the time.
Yeah, it would be probably fine from a GPU point of view, from a graphics card point of view, because you can upscale now. Upscaling is in the engine, so that's probably not a big problem. But the CPU, I think, for Star Citizen itself, Star Citizen would really be maybe sub 20 FPS on console. I think from a CPU point of view in the cities at least, but we don't know, and I don't know what you thought about the performance as you watched it. There were points in the demo, the prologue, that it definitely dropped and hitched and things like that, but we don't know how different Squadron will perform. And I did chat to a little birdie who did say that they'd been doing quite a lot of optimization for Squadron that hopefully might make its way back into the PU at some stage. So we'll see. But
we may have chatted with the same birdie, because I've had people at CIG told me the same thing, that they were working a lot on optimizations for Squadron specifically. So
yeah, that is positive.
The potential sales that I can imagine they look at when they're like, Squadron on consoles, like that would be hard not to at least humor the idea of.
Yeah, I mean, it's like same like releasing it on Steam. Squadron 42 released on Steam and Epic stores would give it a new life a year after release, because people who didn't know about it would be like, "What's this game?" and then be like, "What? Where did I not see this?" You know, and that kind of stuff. So.
I think Arena Commander on Steam would be a really good play too. That'd be big.
You don't talk to me about having Arena Commander as a separate game. I'm still thinking. I still want to believe that launcher is for Arena Commander as well. It's Arena Commander, Squadron 42, and Star Citizen is 3 separate games. So we no longer have to wait for updates from Star Citizen for Arena Commander to be good.
No, dude, you got to use your sim pod for that. Any final thoughts on the CitizenCon? How you want to rate it? Where you want to compare it to other CitizenCons? Give me your big closing statements.
We need some guesses for 1.0 date, surely. Come on, we can't not after.
All right,
let's do
you
that.
first then.
You always.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Go on. No, I don't want to go first. That's terrible.
All right, I'll go.
Go on, Paul,
I'll go. I think that CIG. I'll do 2 things. I think what CIG is thinking and what I think will actually happen. I think honestly, wholeheartedly, and earnestly that CIG believes they can get 1.0 out by the end of 2026.
Oof.
I don't think they will. I think they'll miss it. But I think that's what they were saying when they were walking up there at the end, is that they were trying to get everything done for 1.0 by 2026. I think that's insane. There's no way they can do that, just because of like optimizations, fixing bugs, fixing issues they're going to have to deal with. A lot of that's going to be fixed over time, but I do think that is what CIG thinks. I don't think it's true. I think it's going to be more likely 2027 or 2028, probably 2027. I will say June of 2027, with the possibility of at least jumping over to June to like October, November of 2027. So, just because like if you actually take a hard look at what 1.0 is. The most big thing that's missing are the gameplay loops. But once you have server meshing in, the gameplay loops are a lot easier to code for. They can do missions. Like, I don't know how long it took them to do the monster hunting thing, but it obviously didn't take them a lot of time to get it done, because it would just, my guess is started this year and finished it. So as time goes along, they're going to get better at what they do, and making missions is going to be easier. They have their own performance capture studio. So as times go along, it'll get better and faster, but it takes that time. And since it's only like 5 systems, of which we have 1, and then the other one's about to be in by the end of the year, possibly 2 by the end of next year, with Terra being the last one, the systems aren't really the issue. It's just about gameplay, and gameplay we know they can do, and they can iterate on it fast if they're given the resources. So
that's what I'm wondering about, though, is like the intricacies of the different missions and guilds. Seems just like so much. I mean, compared to the progress we've seen, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen after they finally get the mission refactor in, and maybe some more of the support staff that was on Squadron can move over to Star Citizen to help with that. But man, I'd go so far as to say I will eat 3 whole olives on stream if they got Squadron in, they got 1.0 in by the end of 2026. And
what you don't know is Space Tomato is allergic to olives.
You people know how terrible that kind of a thing sounds, and I know the community will hold me to that. If it doesn't, though, I'm gonna come up with something else for that. But yeah, I think I could see end of 2027 maybe, but 2026 sounds like I have taken a couple too many drugs.
As every dev will ever tell you, anything over a year out is at best guesswork, at worst wish.
Fair.
No dev will, no, you don't develop software or video games with 2-3 years. It's all just plans. And as famously said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So,
ouch. All right, Hav0k, how about you? Yeah, you got to do it.
The insane one of the podcast, and I'm going to say a minimum
2025.
of 2 years, but a maximum of 3.
Wow, you're setting a maximum. Never set a maximum for CIG, man.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, it's usually a bad idea, but
I like you. You have balls.
2 to 3
I like your balls.
All right. All right, man. Fair enough. Any
Yeah, go on. You got to back it up. You got to give us some reasoning.
Yeah. Any reasoning for that?
I don't really have much reasoning for it. No, I just think that there's a lot more. Okay, I kind of do. I think that there's a lot more that they do have actually done that they don't want to show just because they really, really want to they want to go all out. I think that they've got a lot of things that they're holding close to the chest as much as possible so that they can just drop it when they feel it's ready without people knowing about it.
Tim. Okay.
I hope you guys are right, man. 2026 would be amazing.
I hope I'm right too, but
Shall I go in the opposite direction then?
Sure, yeah. Give us a dose of realism.
Go ahead.
Here's a line of thinking for you here. Those ships that they showed us that they're working on over the next year,
12
effectively,
months,
yeah, doesn't include the Spirit E1. So I think that means we can rule out passenger transport. It doesn't include the Legionnaire, even though they were working on it, because they're not going to get hacking done. And it doesn't include the MR version of the Zeus. So it means that bounty hunting isn't going to be done. Or at least the reasons for those ships not being in the game right now is because those gameplay loops are not ready. And so it doesn't look as though those gameplay loops are going to be ready in the next year. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so I think I'm going to go the opposite of you, Hav0k, and say I think there's a lot that they still haven't done, that they've just not even started. And I think we'll get some really, really interesting dot patches for 4.0. I think the next few years are going to be a much better experience of playing the game than they have been over the last 5 years or whatever. I think things like the monster hunting and the basic version of base building coming in will mean that the game feels more fun to just play just in general. But to get all of that in, I think... I mean, I'm not normally that pessimistic, but I don't think it's crazy to think that it's 5 years away at minimum. And I don't think it's completely crazy. This is crazy to say. I don't think it's completely crazy. Like you said, Paul, if they get punched in the mouth by a few things don't quite pan out, things change. There's another pandemic. Let's hope not.
Oh, God.
I don't think it's crazy to think that this really could be like up to 10 years away to actually get 1.0 done. And I really hope I'm completely wrong, and I really hope it's 2 to 3 years away. But I think so much of what they said on that stage was, here are our plans, but we now need to actually go and do it. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope I'm completely wrong.
It really depends on how quickly can they get Pyro out, Nyx, and Castra, because if they can get those out pretty quick, then and start iterating on gameplay content, it will set a tone, because they have to start doing it to get better at it, and they haven't started doing it. I don't think it's unreasonable to say 5 to 8 years. But it's also important for people to remember that, like, if something happens, it takes between 3 to 8 years. It doesn't mean that we're just going to be stuck at what we're seeing right now for 3 to 8 years. Like, we're going to have stuff added as time goes on. Ships, systems, gameplay. Like, it's the game will get better as time goes on. And 1.0 is going to take as long as 1.0 is. But as long as the game gets better, the performance gets better, the feeling gets better, the ships come out and are fun, that's really what matters. It's like it's the journey, not necessarily the destination. 1.0 is not going to change anything other than being a number. So
I think the big thing is, like, keeping in mind that even if it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years out, it's the stuff that's happening in the interim that is going to matter. Like, how much can they optimize with Squadron coming to fruition, we hope? How much can they bring in new gameplay that we really haven't had for a while with the different guilds and missions and base building coming online? And how much can we actually feel just a little bit better going throughout the years of development with some more direction that they've now laid out? But ultimately, I do find myself wondering, like, what's next CitizenCon gonna be about if they've laid out so much ahead of time? And I guess that's more of like the detailed stuff, kind of like last year.
I can tell you what CitizenCon's gonna be about. Hold on.
America?
Welcome back to Texas. We've missed you.
Yeah, it's nice for you, man. You just got to drive out there.
When's your date, Tomato Day? Go on, give us your date. You can't get away.
I think it's like a late 2027 minimum, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's 2028, 29 to actually get 1.0 in there. Because even though I do think that they could do a lot of work pretty quickly, and I think this game is going to be a pretty enjoyable experience much earlier than that, really it just needs optimization. It just needs server meshing to be stabilized so that the game itself is running better. The FPS on the server side can get up, and people can play in larger groups, and the gameplay is made for larger groups. I still see things like the Terra star system, the missions and factions that are involved there, the specific mission givers and voice lines and all of that stuff being polished up. I could see that taking quite a bit of time. But you know, I'm not a freaking game dev. I have no clue what I'm talking about. I'm just going off of what we've already seen. Like,
yeah, it's none of us are experienced game devs in that kind of sense. So we're giving our best educated from the outside. And every game dev I've ever talked to says you always underestimate how much time it takes to polish, because you code something and you code it as best as you can, but often you make mistakes here and there, and that's where bugs come in. But sometimes those mistakes don't create bugs; they just create drains, and you have to go back and rechange the flow so that your coding is better, like less code or better written code, or how things are supposed to work. It's kind of going in and doing that process to make it function better and play better and all that sort of thing. That just takes time. It takes time. It's tedious. It's long. It sucks, but it has to be done, and that usually takes more time than people think. I think that's the real barrier between Star Citizen 4.0 series and 1.0 is that performance. How serious are they on that?
So I am 3 to 5 years on my guess, but I do think that this CitizenCon was pretty good. We didn't hear about dynamic server meshing, which is one thing I would have loved to hear about, but it seems like they're on a different track of messaging when it comes to that stuff. I think this CitizenCon was good in the sense that it set better expectations than usual. That being said, a release date for Squadron is not a release date set in stone. They never are. But laying out what Star Citizen 1.0 was just such a crucial thing that they needed to do. They really needed to make people aware, even if it's a long ways away or a short ways away, make people aware of the game that they want to actually make. Because for such a long time, we've been hearing about bits and pieces of tech and features and all this stuff, and being able to have a place where you can go to reference it all is invaluable to people who are trying to decide if they want to wait 4 more years for this game or not. So I liked that. I'm not going to give it like a number rating, because that would take the context of every other CitizenCon before it. But I think this was this is a pretty decent CitizenCon, both in terms of like hype and expectations. What were your guys' final thoughts on it?
Hav0k?
I thought CitizenCon was great. I especially loved the Genesis panel primarily because of the redwood forests and the dynamic weather front. That really excited me. But
yeah, it was cool.
Also the gear progression and Squadron 42, and then base building and like player org space bases or space stations. That was just took it to the top. And when they gave the information on what Star Citizen will be, that actually gave me hope for the future finally, as far as we actually have a goal in mind and what the game will be like.
I'll come next real quick and just say it was good. Not the best CitizenCon ever, but it hit differently. This felt less of a, hey, we're here on this hype train of here's new ships, here's the cool stuff. We thank you for the community. We're here to make this really cool thing. This one felt less of a really cool thing and more of a, here is our goals. Here is the thing you have to nail us for. Here is the thing that the game is going to be. No longer are we going to talk about imagine. This is the concrete finality. Not 100 systems, 5 systems. Obviously updating over time. Not crafting-based economy. The emphasis on storytelling and lore inside the game, and you kind of bring that out. Guild system. It all felt very much more concrete and less of a woo-woo fest. More of a like here, and that's not always feeling good. That's not going to feel good for everybody. So not the best, but it felt different. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's no longer Road to 4.0. It's
no.
Road
to
1.0.
God.
Yeah, it's Road to Game.
Glad we're past that.
Yeah, Road to Game.
Yeah, it is Road to. That is what it is. Yeah, I think that does tie in. I think I said earlier that we'll probably only be able to judge this one in maybe when 1.0 comes out. We'll maybe look back at it and see how close it was to the actual vision for the game, because they've effectively laid out what it's going to look like, and it will be, can they hit it? And if basically 1.0 does arrive in some sort of half decent time frame and it does look pretty close to how they talked about it here, then I think that will mean this was a good CitizenCon. But if we get 5 years down the line and there's like a reworking of the vision and they drop this stuff and they add this stuff, and then if it doesn't prove to be a good prophecy of the future, let's say, I think it will look like a bad one. But it was hugely enjoyable to watch, and I love being there. But yeah, the actual final take, I think we'll only know in a few years' time.
Cool.
Agreed.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts. If we could go back around one last time, people, you can let the folks know where they can find your own content if they like your takes. And then I will let you go because we've been around for a while. AstroHistorian, go ahead and let the folks know.
I was going to say, it was always going to be a long one just because of it's CitizenCon.
It's a lot of stuff.
But my name is Paul Berserker1 Batman Shelley. You can find me at youtube.com/TheAstroPub live, twitch.tv/TheAstropub, and on if you like lore, you can check me out at youtube.com/TheAstroHistorian.
Awesome. 10 pound.
Yeah, TenPoundFortyTwo in YouTube, but you probably won't find me just by searching that. If you're ever looking for like PC upgrade options, or you want to know how much RAM you need, or what CPU maybe you should buy, if you search any of that stuff into YouTube for Star Citizen, my face probably will pop up somewhere. And yeah, sometimes more. I've been doing a bit more server meshing stuff as well, looking at how the testing is going. So lots of fun, different bits and bobs. But TenPoundFortyTwo on YouTube, nowhere else.
Cool. And Hav0k.
I'm Hav0k, and you can find me at youtube.com/Hav0k. I'm the was the speculation guy. I think it's going to be more so on what the future will bring, rather than just speculating on what they will add, because that 1.0 panel really made things a little bit more apparent as far as where we're going. So yeah, also cover news and gear review, so you can check me out there.
Thank you. And somebody did just mention in chat, one last thing I wanted to touch on, because I thought this was pretty important. In the 1.0 panel, they did not talk about NPC crew or AI blade. For a last thought, what do you guys think that means?
I will take the bold step. I don't think AIs are going to make it to 1.0. I don't think AI crew is going to make it to 1.0. I think they've been deprioritized and are going to be a post-release feature, if that, because they're more emphasis on player. All of the emphasis on player-driven economy and all that kind of stuff means that they want to force you with other players to play the game. They don't want you to just hire a bunch of AI to have you do it for you. So,
oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy. People kicking their PCs with that kind of oof.
Yeah.
I think you're completely right. I think everybody who's planning to man their giant ship with a NPC crew, it's a long way past 1.0 if it ever comes. And I think they've prioritized, like we said, they've shifted the vision of the game, and they have turned it into an MMO where you are to probably do the big stuff, do the big stage and the big ships and everything and the big game content. You need other players, which is going to make some people really mad.
Yep. I've been saying it for years. I don't think they were going to be focusing heavily on NPC crew. I think they might do AI blades, at least for turrets, but I think the game is going to really shift on focusing on group gameplay, and with them coming up with the party finder system and whatnot, that kind of paints a picture of like, you guys, this is an MMO. It's not going to be, you're doing solo gameplay, even with super large ships. It's going to be, you're going to want a group with big ships.
All right.
And I will finish this off by saying, as Jared always says, if we're working on it, we're talking about it. And there just hasn't been enough discussion on anything about AI in any forum other than they still plan on doing it, and that's it. And so if we're even like 5 years out from 1.0, plus all of the sort of like work and stuff like that they got to do, that's still, there's just too many other things for them to get done for them to also work on AI and make that functioning on top of NPCs functioning. So We could be wrong.
Yeah, we'll see
but-
where they go with it.
Could be
I
wrong.
think it's a sketchy take, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see with no mention. Either way, thank you guys again for joining me. Thank you everybody for watching this live if you are, listening afterward on audio platforms or on YouTube. Appreciate you all. This is Citizen Central. It's a monthly podcast, but we also have a weekly one launch sequence with a one-on-one discussion about these topics. And next episode will be up within the week, and that will be with Luke Stevens, looking at this from a little bit of a outside perspective. So if you want to check that out, consider subscribing to the podcast on audio platforms, checking it out on Space Tomato Tour, coming to our live shows we do every once in a while. Either way, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for the support. Danny, my boy, I see you dropping a big super chat at the end there. And I will see you all next week, and I'll raid you out on Twitch. Bye.